Art therapy is the usage of art for personal expression and emotional healing. Creative mediums can be used to express ideas, emotions, and traumas symbolically. The ability to express these burdens, especially in a professional setting with the help of a trained art therapist, can help remedy anxiety, depression, and can aid communication struggles and lingering effects of childhood trauma. To learn more about how art therapy is conducted and its various benefits, we talked to the clinical director of Indigo Art Therapy Studio, Devin Schlegel.
Can you describe how an art therapy session is usually conducted?
It's funny, I get that question a lot, and I wish I had a more straightforward answer. It depends on who I'm seeing and what their goals are. I tend to structure most sessions kind of in 2 or 3 parts. The first one I usually do like a brief, I call it like a check-in or a warm-up drawing. And I usually structure that to help whoever I'm seeing like transition from whatever's going on for them, like before they came in, to transition into like the creative space and like the therapy space. And then usually there's like at least a second part, which is kind of the core art activity, and that'll really just depend on the age of who I'm working with and what their goals are. We'll do some type of art that might be like painting or drawing. It could be like clay or found object sculpture, really any of that. And depending on what we've talked about, especially if it's like a little bit heavier, a little bit more like trauma focused, I might do like a checkout activity to sort of allow them to leave what we talked about kind of behind so that they can go about their day. So that's like a rough idea, but of course that's going to vary depending on, who I'm seeing and what they're coming to see me for.
My next question is, what are some of the direct benefits that your clients can obtain from participating in art therapy?
Of creating artwork can be like improved self-expression. Artwork can be really good for relaxation. Artwork can also help us kind of challenge our inner critic. I think a lot of people are uncomfortable with art making, and sometimes that's a positive thing. It allows us to get comfortable doing things that we're not comfortable doing. And then on the longer run, oftentimes artwork can help us get perspective on things that we might not otherwise get perspective on. So art's really good for individuals that are processing trauma, because if we've been through a traumatic experience, it's really easy to just put words to it, but that doesn't really fully depict the experience, right? So art making sort of allows for a deeper kind of understanding, and it also creates something that both like the therapist and the client can look at together and process, instead of like the client saying something in therapy and then it's just a word that they've said and you have to try to kind of go back and process it and sit with it. But art gives them something tangible to reflect on. And so I think that's another benefit that I think clients can leave art therapy sessions with, is having something more tangible to reflect back on.
Can art therapy be practiced at home independently?
Yeah, so I think art is inherently therapeutic, and art therapists don't own that. Art has been used therapeutically throughout cultures for like hundreds of years, and art therapists absolutely do not own that. But it's similar to like art therapists are trained just similarly to how talk therapists are trained. So if you're going to art therapy, you're going to therapy.
Mm-hmm.
So you can use art at home and it can be relaxing, but it's not art therapy unless you're doing it with an art therapist with like goals in mind.
Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon.
You too.
To hear more about the effects and accessibility of art therapy, we interviewed Creative Arts Department Head at Immaculata High School in Ontario, Dr. Robinson Cseke, who has a PhD in art education. I'm now here with Dr. Robinson Cseke, the Creative Arts Department Head at Immaculata High School in Ontario.
Hi, nice to meet you.
So the first question I just wanted to ask you was, we learned that art is inherently therapeutic. But most of the benefits that come with it come when you're working with a professional art therapist in, a professional setting. So I wanted to ask you, with your personal experience and experience working with your students, what are some benefits that people can get from art when working independently without a professional art therapist?
So it's definitely therapeutic in that the thing with all the creative arts, I'm a department head of the creative arts at my school, which includes all of the arts, including music, dance, and drama, as well as the visual art side of things. Visual art is my area, visual art and photography. So that's where I get most of my experience from. And with visual art, well, with all the arts, there's a connection with the emotion for sure. Creative writing is right up there as well. And I think, obviously, there's a direct correlation between emotions and mental well-being, right? And being able to navigate those. And so having any opportunity to be able to think through, work through any kind of emotions that you may have, I think promotes mental well-being, or can. Certainly if you have an art therapist helping you, you'll be able to direct that more specifically. But for my class, I try to set up situations so that my students are able to do that better. So it can be simple things like just setting up the environment that you're working in so that it's comfortable, right? In a place that you feel happy and enjoyment, that you're actually doing your work in.
So you would say one of the main effects is sort of similar to meditation, just like the relaxing nature of just doing it?
Yes, and in fact, very much so. And I think part of it is linked with the physicality of doing things with your hands as well. So, art therapy, I think, is very closely related to occupational therapy, and that, it's the doing of something. Obviously, if somebody already loves to do art, then art therapy is a really nice way to bring that in, and they're doing an activity that they can work through things, emotional issues, mental issues, whatever, between them and the therapist, whatever they decide they're going to work towards doing. But I think the physical aspect of visual art, I think personally, is very important. And I think there's a definite a therapeutical link to that, the actual physical movement. Sometimes it's repetitive movement. That's why I kind of link it often to sort of meditation in my class. Sometimes I start with them just doodling and mark making on a page randomly, right? It's the actual physical movement that can relax somebody, and then eventually they feel more comfortable with that, and then we link creativity into that, and hopefully it builds into something more, which the student can take anywhere, towards an art piece or towards just some mental health, right? That's linked to that.
Well, when we talked to one of the members of Indigo Art Therapy, they did say that when they're conducting the therapy sessions, they mostly use mediums like colored pencil, watercolor, acrylic, those hands-on ones that you mentioned. So I do think that there is a connection between the actual doing it that gets you some of those benefits.
Right.
So we're asking you these questions because art therapy has been shown to have lots of benefits, but we want to make sure that it's accessible for anyone watching this video who might be interested. So another question I want to ask you is, what would you recommend for someone who isn't currently an artist, or maybe doesn't feel super artistic, as in they don't currently take a class? What would you recommend for someone like that who wants to experience some of the benefits of art therapy? How would they sort of just get into art making?
Well, the first step is just being courageous enough to pick, get yourself a sketchbook and a pencil. And that's scary for a lot of people, especially if it's very foreign to them. You're just trying. But I think you have to move away from any self-judgment of, I'm good or I'm not very good. It doesn't really matter. I mean, I always tell my students, you're starting from where you're at, right? Everybody in the class is at a different spot. And the whole point is to improve from where your starting point is, and you can't compare to anybody else. So I think that's always the biggest hurdle, especially for students who don't feel that they're maybe very artistic, they don't have natural talent, whatever their hang up is, right, in terms of not wanting to get started. I think the first thing is you just have to try to start, right? Buy a sketchbook and draw whatever you like. There's, whatever interests you. It might be anime, it might be cartooning, I have one of the exercises I do in class, and my students always struggle with it at the beginning because it feels weird to them. But then we do it enough times. And these things you have to do more than once, right? Because you have to develop a comfort. But what I do is I play little snippets of music, maybe 3 minutes of a piece of music. Again, I usually, well, not always, in an exercise, I will have some lyrics, but I try to choose very different kinds of music, very broad spectrum. And I just play it, and I have the students with a blank piece of paper and and I'll change the material. So sometimes they'll be working in oil pastel, something with lots of colors that it's easy and accessible to use. And they simply respond to the music. And so they can respond representationally, so they can create something that is an image that they recognize, or it can be completely abstract. A lot of times they end up using marks that are kind of rhythmic because they're just doing it to the music, but I find it's a really good exercise to get students to sort of loosen up once they get beyond this is kind of weird, I don't know what to do thing, which they often do at the very beginning. When we start that, they kind of look around and they're not quite sure what to put down. But once they see other people are sort of doing it and they pick up something and they start mark making, eventually they get more comfortable. And the more I do it as a teacher, as an activity, the better they get at it, the more comfortable they are. So if a student's at home and they're trying to find entry ways into how do I get involved in this stuff, something as simple as that is a really good starting point.
Well, thank you very much for the interview.
You're welcome.
One of the major benefits of art therapy is its effect on stress and anxiety. Students at Stanton often struggle with the stresses of rigorous academics and expectations. How they utilize forms of art therapy in their lives.
Hi, my name is Francine Flores, and I'm in 12th grade at Stanton.
So, how would you say that you use art as a form of therapy in your life?
Well, here at Stanton, it's very rigorous academically, and there's always thoughts about extracurriculars and having to do homework and exams, and constantly the pressure of all of that combined, all to just get into college, can really be overwhelming at times. So my hobby is art. And I like to indulge it sometimes because amidst all the fast-pacedness that is Stanton, you can just take a moment to breathe and just slow down a little bit and take a moment to just paint or sketch or just like indulge yourself in something so therapeutic to me. Therapeutic. Like, it's therapeutic to me, and it can be therapeutic to anybody who can indulge in it too. So I also personally like doing art because it's so disconnected from Stanton. Like, I can separate art from my academic work, and that's why it's so much easier to like take a breather and just indulge in it, because I don't have to worry about academics when I lose myself in my artwork. And so that's why I think it's so much easier to just keep these two things separate, one as a hobby and then one as academics.
I'm Kason Marshall, and I'm in 12th grade.
So how do you use art as a form of therapy in your life?
A lot of times when I'm stressed or just dealing with different frustrations, I like to use art just to kind of express myself in a healthier way.
So what is it about art that you feel gives you those positive effects?
Honestly, it's just kind of the fact that when I'm making art, it's just kind of coming straight from my head. Like, I can express all these kind of emotions and things onto the paper in kind of a creative way, which kind of helps me deal with them. Really what I like about it is that you can't really make mistakes with art. So even if what you're kind of putting down is exactly what you had in mind, it's still kind of a way of expressing yourself and just getting that out on paper. So that's all, it's just kind of going.